My talk today is entitled Kundalini When Psychiatry Can Help. So I have three main purposes to my talk, three main points. These are, does an aberrant Kundalini process lead to mental illness? Medications can be helpful in some instances, and the demonization of psychiatry and mental health practitioners add to the stigma of mental illness and prevents people from seeking care. So there's Lucy, psychiatric help 5 cents. So first I'm going to talk about the portrayal of psychiatric practitioners. So why are psychiatric practitioners portrayed in negative ways? They're regarded with fear, suspicion, subject to ridicule and demonization by average people, but also within the medical profession, and have never quite had the cachet or the prestige associated with other people in the medical profession, and in some ways has been treated like a stepchild. So, in the extreme, psychiatric practitioners are felt to be nefarious, deceiving, tricking patients, and even causing them deliberate harm. In popular culture, including movies and fiction, psychiatrists are always the evil villains or the incompetent, bumbling fools. You recognize this person? Hannibal Lecter. He was the evil psychiatrist played by Anthony Hopkins in the movie The Silence of the Lambs. He's apparently, this image of him is as well known as pictures of Freud. Everyone recognizes this picture, and he was very evil. How about the iconic movie about care in a psychiatric hospital, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest? There's Nurse Ratched. This was actually filmed not too far from where I live, and I have actually been in this hospital. This was filmed in 1975, and I'm including it because it really shaped the public's perception and attitude about ECT. Prior to the movie, it was regarded as just nothing nefarious, nothing harmful, but after the movie came out, it really has been treated as illegitimate, cruel, harming patients, when in fact it's actually a very legitimate treatment, although it's been replaced by more now by TMS. But the point is, these images linger and they last a long time. It's been 45 years, and I think most people would still regard ECT, electroconvulsive therapy, as something barbaric. I only included this. This is a distressing picture. I only included it because prior to modern psychiatry, people who were mentally ill were placed into institutions, and they were called insane asylums. This one is from London's Bedlam Hospital in the 1800s. You probably are even familiar with that saying, oh, it's like Bedlam. And in fact, 2 days ago, I was reading an article in the paper, and this woman referred to her house as being like Bedlam, you know, small b. So it's known for its chaotic and kind of inhumane environment. Although later there were reforms. But this I only wanted to show you. As I said, it's very distressing, but you see these people even in chains. So this is what it was like before psychiatric medications were available. And in fact, at Bedlam, the local people would come to the hospital and pay admission in order to watch these poor patients for their own amusement. So that's Bedlam. Bedlam was one of many. And as I said, toward the end of the century, there was reforms in these institutions. Um, so why is there so much fear about psychiatry and psychology? So when I say psychiatry, I also mean the umbrella of anyone who works in psychology, psychiatry, or related field. Well, there's a fear of mind control, or people meddling with your mind, someone messing with your mind. There's also sometimes a belief that the doctor is mad, the doctor's insane, and that's because often in these media portrayals and films and books, the doctors actually do go insane. And as I said, this is popular in books, in films, even in comic books. And people are also worried that they will be forced to take medications or treatments against their will, or even being incarcerated, meaning confined to, an institution or a hospital. Now there's some truths to this. It's possible, but only in rare cases, especially the ability to give a person medication against their will is, it's really extremely rare and hard to do, and actually requires a court order. So it's not something that's done easily, and even confinement in a hospital can be done briefly, but overall, this is not something that's done routinely or even frequently. So Kundalini and mental health. Important question. Does an aberrant Kundalini cause mental disorders? It's been long established in Asia, in other words, in India, these other parts of the world, that an unstable or dysregulated process can lead to mental illness. It's really kind of common knowledge. And I'm going to quote Gopi Krishna because he was one of the first people to talk about Kundalini and mental illness in Western culture, and his first book that came out around 1967 or 68. From his autobiography, he talks about this many times, but this is from his autobiography, Kundalini, the Evolutionary Energy in Men, and he states, the power, when aroused in the body, not attuned to it with the help of various disciplines or not genetically mature for it, can lead to awful mental states. Almost every form of mental disorder, from hardly noticeable to aberrations of the most horrible form of insanity, to neurotic and paranoid states, to megalomania, and by causing tormenting pressure on the reproductive organs, to an all-consuming thirst that is never assuaged. So he describes a range of symptoms: psychosis, insanity, paranoia, so delusions, or even of a schizophrenic type disorders, mania, bipolar or mood disorders in varying degrees. And I think he also is referring to, sexual disorders or sexual addiction in that last part of that quote. So the question is, if we believe this, if this is true, the question is what to do. So what to do about it? If you feel like you have an active Kundalini, or someone you know or love has an active Kundalini, what's there to be done? Well, you can do nothing. That is an option. No one can force anyone to take a treatment or a medicine that they don't want to, as I said, in rare cases. So a rare case would be, say, someone who's floridly psychotic and is hearing voices as a harm to themselves and others, living on the street. And so it does happen sometimes. But as I said, it's very difficult to do, and it's a rare thing. So what to do? So the thing is to consider the severity of the symptoms. Gopi Krishna spoke about this. So if the symptoms are overwhelming, so anxiety or panic attacks, severe depression or mood swings, paranoid delusions, hearing voices that torment, such as ridiculing or condemning people. So people are often tormented with these voices that, that call them names and run them down and are, incessant, never ceasing. And the worst case would be command voices that tell a patient to hurt themselves or others. So that's the extreme. So it's a matter of degrees. So two things to consider. How bothersome are the symptoms and how much are they affecting your life? So are you able to function and, for example, to keep up with your activities of daily living, such as, personal hygiene, shopping, cooking, cleaning? Are you becoming withdrawn or isolated? You might want to consider, so if you're not functioning well, then you might want to consider medication. Okay, so I'm a little ahead of myself. I tend to, when I'm speaking, I tend to talk faster. And we have actually plenty of time. So since we have some time, I'll talk a little bit about some case studies that that showcase what I'm talking about. In my practice over many years. I'll give you I'll give you a few examples. So first was a person who was hearing voices, although they were rather benign, but also seeing apparitions, which were bothersome to her, but she felt that she could live with it. She felt she could live with it without taking medication. So she had a very quiet lifestyle. She lived out in the country. They lived out in the country with a family who was very supportive. The patient, had she had hobbies that were helpful. It helped distract her from the voices and the apparitions. She still heard and saw them, but she felt she could live with them. And she, preferred not to take medication. She checked in with me regularly to make sure that things weren't escalating. And she did very well. I saw her for many years. And sometimes, these voices and the seeing apparitions, they would wax and wane, get better and get worse, often depending on her stress. And as I said, she had a very quiet life. She lived in the country, went for walks, and just tried to keep her life very regular and moderate in all things. Now, another patient came to see me because they were hearing voices, but also, so at first they came and wanted to try medication. So they were on a low dose and was doing well, but then came one day and told me that now there was a man living in her closet, which was clearly, aberration, a delusion, a hallucination, a visual hallucination. But she said she could live with it. She could live with the man in the closet. It bothered her. It frightened her, although she also felt that she could live with that. And she did for quite a long time. But as I said, this patient would, check in with me. And one day came and said, well, the man in the closet is becoming, menacing and threatening me, and it was bothering her more. But she didn't want to increase her medications at that point. But she came back not long after that and said, well, now, patient, she was very frightened. The man in the closet was threatening to come out and hurt her or her friends, and voices were getting worse. But mostly the man in the closet was really distressing and tormenting her. And so at that point, we made the decision to increase her medication, and she found this very helpful. The man in the closet did not go away entirely, but he kind of settled down and didn't bother her, didn't bug her too much. The ideal in medications is that all symptoms diminish and go away completely. That's always the goal, but it's not always possible. So there's an example of two people who had similar kinds of experiences. One who managed without medication, and one who did. So let me think, because we still have a little more time, about maybe another case study. Okay, so this is a case of bipolar disorder. A patient came to see me, was referred to me after they got out of the hospital, moved to where I was working, and this person was hospitalized after a very serious suicide attempt. He had a long story, but he had kind of inadvertently got involved with the cult. And of course, he didn't realize it was a cult, and was living an extreme life of poverty and malnourishment. But he believed in his leader, and wanted to, continue to work his way up in this organization. But the point is, he became so manic that he thought he was God. I mean, he really thought he was God, and had all this, the symptoms of staying up all night and talking fast and grandiosity, and not making good decisions, which is what happens when people get into a mania. It's well known. But when he realized that he actually wasn't God, he fell, he crashed. He fell very far and became extremely depressed, and that led to his suicide attempt. And he came already on medications, which he stayed on, and he did very well on those medications. He would sometimes, I wouldn't see him sometimes for a while. I know he was off of them for a while and was doing okay, but then came back because he was getting back into a mania, and once again was making poor decisions. So I retired, but I hope he's doing well. And let's see. I guess one more is cases is someone who also bipolar, was both physically and mentally disabled, poor, didn't have much money, but in one of his manic states he bought a muscle car, completely inappropriate car that he couldn't afford. And it didn't understand at the time why he was making, such a bad decision. So that's what happened when he was in a mania. And, I'm sorry he didn't come to me before he did that, before he went and started going on these shopping sprees and buying these things he didn't need or couldn't afford. I assumed the car was repossessed. Anyway, so So medication has its place. Now, those are extremes, but there are, different types of, all of these things are degrees. There's people who are just kind of mildly, have mild psychotic or delusional symptoms, and then bipolar, such as bipolar 2, where the symptoms are not as severe and sometimes people can live with it. So what can we do? Well, very important for everyone is lifestyle. So moderation in all things. Probably most of you know this. Moderation in all things. Keep regular at everything, including meals. Eat nutritious meals. Get adequate sleep. Live in a pleasant environment, if that's if that's possible. Spend time in nature. If you have a religious or spiritual practice, that may be helpful. And have faith in the process. Kundalini is a natural phenomena, and it has its own sovereign nature. So it has rules that we don't really understand, but we can have faith in those rules, and we can have faith in the Kundalini process itself. So I think that that's helpful to know that it's not something, it's not a pathology, it's not something that's abnormal, and that it has its own way, its own nature that we can I guess respect and just have faith in it. So so let's talk about medication. If your symptoms are bothering you and you feel like you're not functioning, also if people around you feel that that's the case, that you're not functioning well and that your moods are are either depressed or in a mania or anything like that. It's not always possible to be objective about yourself. So it helps to get feedback from other people, especially those close to you. As I said, you can't always sometimes recognize it yourself. So if possible, see a practitioner who specializes in psychiatric medications, if it's possible. Now, for some symptoms, it's not that important to go to a specialist. A general practitioner can prescribe some medications, but if you ever get into more complicated medications, it's better to see someone who has some expertise in the field. Give medication a trial. Just try them. And then when you try them, give them time to work. Don't just take them for 3 days or a week or sometimes even a month and say, well, that's not working, I'm going to stop taking them, because it sometimes takes a while. For some medications like antidepressants, it can take a month or even a little longer, although some people get relief right away, and I've had that happen. Right away. People's lives are better, they're happier, they're thriving, life isn't so difficult. And so, as I said, your symptoms should abate. Now, if you decide you want to discontinue your medication, don't do it abruptly. Don't just stop. Taper off slowly, but only really work with your practitioner. It happens, people will be on antidepressants and they feel better and say, oh, I don't need them anymore. Well, when you go off of them, then people see that they do, or these other medications, these mood stabilizers or anti-anxiety medications. But this is actually the ideal, is to take a medication when you need it, and then when you no longer need it, taper off of it. you don't have to take a medication if you don't need it, and all practitioners would agree with that. It's considered a good day when a patient can no longer needs their medication. But if you become symptomatic, and I'll give you a couple of examples, should restart the medication, and contact your provider right away. So that's my advice about medications. So we're getting close to the summary here. So an unstable, dysregulated, aberrant Kundalini process may be responsible for mental illness, at least in part. It's probably not the entire story, but I think in general, it's very much a part of mental disorders. Mental disorders respond to appropriate medications and treatments, and can be successful. That's the goal. And please keep in mind that the stigma of mental illness and those who treat it, just be aware of that, and try not to contribute or condone any unwarranted attacks on the profession. You are not alone. If you feel that you're alone and don't know what to do, you can contact the American Center for the Integration of Spirituality Transformation Experiences, ACISTE, for help. This is the website. I'm sorry I didn't know how to put the website on the program, but they have many programs, but they also work as a clearinghouse and can advise you as to someone in your area who would be sympathetic and maybe be more understanding of your situation, and can give you that advice for seeing someone locally for you. So thank you very much for coming to my talk this morning. I look forward to any questions or comments or concerns in the question and answer portion of the conference. Thank you.